Sorry, it is later than usual, but we'll try to catch up. With your permission, we'll start with a story. This one, we are moving away from Ashkenazi stories, we're going to Sephardi story. The Ben Ish Chai made the trip to Eretz Israel, the almost 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And so when he wanted to go from Baghdad to Eretz Israel to visit, he made up, so it's a long journey, it takes a couple of days, maybe more than a week. And so he made a deal with the person that was, the whole caravan, in charge of the caravan. He told him, listen, I want to stop wherever we are on the way for Shabbat. I don't want to travel on Shabbat. Shalom. I don't want to travel on Shabbat. And the person said no. So the Ben Ish Chai gave him a large sum of money, and then he said yes, fine. He agreed. And as they made their way, there's a whole caravan of camels, and they're going in the desert, and everything. It was on Friday, so Ben Ish Chai started, and his entourage, they started unloading the camels because they wanted to stop for Shabbat. So the leader of the caravan came to him and he screamed. He says, "You really want to stay here? You want to keep everyone here in the middle of the desert? There's wild animals, there's bandits, we can't stay here. There's no way that I'm going to put everyone's lives in jeopardy just for you guys." So he was right. It was right. It was quite scary. And but Rabbeinu Yosef Chaim, he wasn't afraid. He said, "Look, no problem. I see you're scared. You could go ahead and continue. Me and my entourage, we're going to stay right here. And after Shabbat, we're going to try to catch up to you. Don't worry about it." And so this guy got everyone together, and they started, getting ready to go. But when they tried, the camels wouldn't move. None of the camels budged. The whole caravan, all the camels stayed. And whatever they did, they beat them, they pulled them, nothing. And they see these camels are really stubborn. So they decided to make camp there. But they weren't going to stay out there in the open. They spread out. They went into the caves and the mountains all around to hide, because it's dangerous. So they made different groups and they went hiding. And the Ben Ish Chai and his students, no problem. They got ready for Shabbat. They got all dressed for Shabbat as if they're at home. And then when it came time, they started praying, Lachadodi, singing, and then Kiddush. And they sat down for the Seudah. They were eating the Seudah in the middle of the desert. And these Goyim, they were watching them from far, what's going to happen to them. And now, they started eating the Seudah, singing everything in the middle of the desert. All the sounds were echoing. And then these Arabs, suddenly they see a large group of bandits are coming full force towards the Jews. They said, Al-Yahud is gone. That's it. Chas v'shalom. And then suddenly they see, as they were getting closer, they were closer and closer. They got off their horses. They were coming at the Jews. Suddenly they started walking backwards. They jumped on their horses and they ran off. So these people, they were just sitting there with the mouth dropped. They saw what's going on, and then they went to the Ben Ish Chai and they started kissing his gilima, his robe, saying that now we know that Ein Kelohei HaYehudim, there is no God like the God of the Jews. It's a big Kiddush Hashem. The Ben Ish Chai was known. There's a lot of other stories like this with Chachamim, that this similar thing happened to desert, and either lions, bandits, these sort of things came, and the Baruch Hashem, they were saved. Okay, so back to the halachot of mukseh. We are I think we're still in the beginning of mukseh mahmat gufo. Mukseh mahmat gufo is something that is, it itself is mukseh because there is no use for it. It's not a kli, it's not food, so therefore it is absolutely mukseh. It's tougher than other cases of mukseh, being that you cannot move it even letzorech gufo unkomo. You cannot move this object even for its own use. That means you just want to use it, the object itself, or the makom, or the place of it. And we gave a lot of examples of this mukseh. Now we're going to try and see more within this. We said, mukseh mahmat gufo, if a person sets this thing aside before Shabbat, that means he said before Shabbat, I just thought I'm going to use this for this and this on Shabbat, then that will work. This thing is not mukseh, and he could move it for that. Or if he actually used it before Shabbat, he actually used, let's say, the rock to keep the door open, then this thing, it is not mukseh. Okay? One who is eating seeds on Shabbat. So when you crack open the seed, what's left over, the peels, the shells, if they are not edible for animals, so what happens? It's not food, and it's not a kli. So it is mukseh mahmat gufo. So what would you say is the halacha? Can he, with his hand, take them out of his mouth and put them aside? Or does he have to, excuse me, forgive me, does he have to spit it out without touching it? You understand the question? So what do you say?
If you're in the street, you just spit.
Right, if you're an Israeli walking on the streets on Shabbat,
Yes,
this is the
what they
kavod of Shabbat. Are you kidding me? That's the only way to do it. But halachically, I think they're mahmir. I think that's what it is. Your typical Israeli is very mahmir on this thing, on this halakha. They say, it's mukseh. They don't want to touch it. But really, halachically, you don't have to. You could use your hand to take it and put it aside. But once you placed it somewhere, you placed it in on the table or something, then you can't just pick it up and throw it in the trash, because then already you have to use a shinu, you have to use something else to remove it and into the trash or wherever you like. The same idea is with the seeds of olives, the seeds of the pits of olives, and the pits of what else? Dates. Anything else? These things are of no use. Is it true you could take the seeds of the pits of a date and you crush it into a flour? You could make use of it as a food item?
Sounds familiar.
It does, no? It's in the back of my mind. But anyhow, it's definitely mukseh. Something that you're eating on Shabbat. It wasn't edible on Bnei Shemashot, so it's absolutely mukseh, and you cannot. It's mukseh mahmat gufo, and therefore one cannot. If you need that space, you can't just pick it up and put it aside unless you use a shinu. You use it like a squeegee mop or something to get rid of it. Now, this is true. Let's say on an olive, right? Pit on an olive. That's true if there is no pieces of olive left on it. If there are little pieces of olive left on it, then it's not a problem. Then it doesn't become mukseh because there's some food there, and therefore a person could go ahead and move it. You see the distinction? There's a difference. If it's absolutely empty, I don't know. Some people like to keep it in the mouth and they play with it and until there's nothing there, then they have turned it into mukseh. How about things that are ra'ui la'achila, like let's say chicken skin. Some cats would eat it, right? Or bones, like that are softer. They're not like these heavy bones. Those are fine, right? Condition for those is, this is important, that there are animals in town. Not that, oh, you know what? I know there are dogs. No, dogs not a good example. What's something a goat would eat? The peel of a watermelon. Where did you see goats around here? haven't. I have. There's someone that has goats. So that's how it's mutar to do it. If you're talking about a big city and there is not one goat or sheep in your town, then this thing is mukseh, because who are you going to give it to, right? Rabban Tzion Abba Shaul Zechron Bracha, I think, said that if I don't want to get confused. I think he said that if we know that such an animal exists, I think he says that it's okay, but Obadiah says no. As long as within the city that you're in, there is such an animal, even if it's on the other side of the city, then it doesn't have a halacha of mukseh, and therefore one could go ahead and move it without having to resort to any shinui. Right? As long as it's there in that town. Good. Now, let's get to a ball. Right? What's the halacha of a ball? A ball that is made for playing with, it's not a kli. It's not a kli, and therefore it's mukseh, right? Just like the Shulchan Aruch writes. Shulchan writes that a ball is mukseh. The Ramah writes in the Shulchan Aruch, that's Rabbi Moshe Isserlish writes, that the people coming from Ashkenazi countries, they have a custom to be lenient on this, right? But just they have to be careful not to play with it on a dirt ground. Why? That's a different issue, because where there is dirt, then the person is going to go ahead and try to straighten up, and that, as you remember, in the halacha of boneh, it's boneh. When you have ups and downs, when you have dips and mounds on the ground, and you straighten that up, that's melacha of boneh. You're beautifying the land, you're landscaping, and that's asur. So he writes, as long as, let's say, it's a floor, it's a carpet, or it's a cobblestone, or anything like that, he writes that Ashkenazim are mekel to do it. Now, so that's that. Acharonim later, like more modern Acharonim, Chachamim write that the balls that we have in these days, right, in the modern times, they are manufactured from the beginning just for playing with. The balls that they had at the time of the Talmud, it wasn't that. It would be a rock. Yeah. Could you imagine playing soccer with that? Or they would take like old clothes and they would stuff it like into a roundish thing. Even at the time of the Tosafot, that's like 700 years ago, they would call it Pluto. That's like a Pluto. Like that's what they would call it. It's these sort of things, like that was then, and it was dirty, and it wasn't something that you wanted to work with at all. So certainly there's more reason to be mukseh. So these acharim say the balls that we have nowadays, you are allowed to allow children to play with them, again to make sure that they could only play on a paved ground or on carpeted ground, or tiled, this sort of flooring. Also, or on the table, talking about ping pong table, right? So now there's a lot of back and forth on this. Like, between Rav Yashi, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zatzal, Be'er Moshe, there are differences of opinions. Like, one says that no, ping pong, it makes too much noise and there is running around involved, so therefore one shouldn't play ping pong. It's across the board. But at the end of the day, they say this is all good and nice for Ashkenazi poskim, Ashkenazi people, because the Ramah says that people that come from Ashkenaz, they could be more lenient. Sephardim, though, we go to Maran, Shulchan Aruch, they're more mahmir. However, still we are allowed to allow our children, to play with them. But for gedolim, for adults, it is for sure asur. Now, poskim in Eretz Israel, they even go further. They're they say unfortunately, what goes on in Israel, all the games, all the soccer games, unfortunately, a lot of them are on Shabbat, and people are Mechalei Shabbat. They travel from far and near, to go to the stadiums to watch the games, and the whole Shabbat, all the things that are going on. So the Chachamim, they try to make even more gedarim, more fences, and they show it's such a terrible disrespect to Shabbat, as we know. A couple of years back, there was a group of soccer players that they went and they were pushing that the game should be moved from Shabbat to the middle of the week. that was a big movement because they wanted to keep the kavod of Shabbat. I don't know what happened at the end. Like a couple of them became ba'alei teshuvah and they wanted to do that. Now, in the same token, let's talk about more toys. We are allowed to allow our children to play with Legos. You can't say that it's mukseh, although some poskim say it's asur on Shabbat to play with Legos because it's boneh, you're putting things together. So if it's asur because of boneh, then the Legos will be mukseh. Other poskim say that no, this thing is not, it's even more lenient than binyan lesha'a, that means temporary building. It's there from the beginning, they put it together to break it down. So therefore, it's not boneh, and we could allow our children to play with it, and therefore, they're not mukseh when it comes to halachot mukseh.
So what if your child said, play ball with me, what are you gonna? Shinui, kicking, no?
Kicking is not shinui, that's the way you play with the ball. You gotta find something. You gotta find a way. Let them play together, or if they're alone, you gotta figure something out. Look, we can't say, especially the balls that we have nowadays, we can't really say that they're mukseh. It's different because from the beginning they were made, to play with. But even that, some poskim say it doesn't help so much for adults. For kids, let them. We can't say that it's absolutely asur. I can't leave you with this halacha without saying that the Gemara says there was a place called, if I'm not mistaken, Tur Shimon, the mountain of Shimon. There was a city. It says the only reason why it was destroyed was because they were playing with a ball on Shabbat. That's the reason why that city was destroyed. So it was like Chacham Ben Zion Zichron Livracha would say that, look, that's more of a reason to say playing with a ball on Shabbat is asur.
They don't let children play in Israel either, or?
In Israel, children do play.
But not Ashkenazi.
Ashkenazim, I haven't, honestly, I haven't seen kids in like parks and stuff playing so much with balls. I don't know what they do. But yeah, they find different things. But there are a lot of other games. Baruch Hashem, nowadays there's a lot of other games that the kids could play. They could play puzzles, Lego, these things. They could play with any toy basically, even if it makes noise, like a choo-choo train. It goes like but as long as it doesn't work with a battery, even if it makes the noise. Some poskim say no, because it makes a noise, it's asur. But we say it's fine. Moshe Feinstein even says these sort of toys, they're fine as long as they don't. They have these guns that you go like this. There's sparks coming out. That's asur. that's molid ish. You're creating the sparks. That's a problem. Or if they make a sound of a song, like there's some choo-choo trains that you wind them, and then it starts singing. That's asur. That we shouldn't do. But winding car, or wind it all they're doing is winding the spring, and then the spring lets loose and the car starts moving. That's fine. That you could do on Shabbat. It's they could do it. Let them play with it. There's a lot of kosher games that the children, Baruch Hashem, nowadays they could play with, and it's not a problem. We said, what did we say? We said they could play with puzzles. They could do, they have jump rope. There was a couple of years back, there was a lot of kids playing, what was it? Chinese jump rope. You familiar with that? You gotta be. But then times change. Different times they have different games. They have sandboxes. A sandbox, as we said before, a sand is mukseh mahmat gufo, right? But if you put in a sandbox and you set it up for playing again, we said you are allowed to move it so the kids could play in a sandbox, which is definitely dry, because if it's moist, then they could do bonnet, they could build things, and not. Nowadays, people are moving away from sand anyhow, because it really gets dirty and nobody has the patience for it. So there's a lot of floor games that are that are good. Baruch Hashem, these days, there's a brachot bee and the shabbat bee, and there's all these bees and all these games that kids could play with. Now, flour, right? You take wheat and you grind it up into flour, not flour that smells good. or dough, right? Both of them, these are mukseh because they're not edible, right? Flour is not edible, and dough is not edible. Flour, if you add sugar, like other things, to it, or maybe they roast it a little bit, it's edible. But then plain old flour on Shabbat, because at the time Shabbat began, it was migu de it ketzai beben hashmashot, it ketzai lekulle yoma, because it was mukseh at the onset of Shabbat, when Shabbat began. So that status of mukseh of it remains with it the whole Shabbat. So someone wants to use, what could you do with flour? Oh, you know what they could do? They put it in balloons, right? You take a flour, you put it in a balloon, and it becomes a ball. You could play with it. Kids could play with it. You can't do it on Shabbat, right? If they do it before Shabbat, then they have set it up. They have made use of it. They have set it aside for this usage. Otherwise, they can't. They use it for squeeze balls. Is that what it's called? Is something like that? Stress balls. Yeah, they could use it for that, but then it can't be used. Just flour itself, or dough for that matter, cannot be moved on Shabbat, except for it's it's over here. You have to use a shinui to get rid of it. How about cans, right? Canned goods. Let's say you have a can of sardines, tuna, beans, whatnot. So there is a machloket. Being that there is a machloket, poskim, like Rabbi Neri Silver, based on the Chazon Ish, he says that it is asur to open them on Shabbat. It's open to open cans on Shabbat. Therefore, they say it's mukseh. So if you have a can on the table, a can of pickles, a can of tuna on the table, according to them, you cannot move this out of the way unless you do with a shinui or something. Otherwise, it's mukseh. It's mukseh mahmat gufo, because you can't open it. It becomes like a rock. There's no use for it. So therefore, you can't move it unless you use a shinui. The tzorach gufo umkomo, you can't move it. Some say, which is many achronim, they say that being that most people, after they don't keep this, so therefore opening it doesn't make it into a keli, like we said before. Therefore, they say that it is asur to open it on Shabbat. Once it's did I say asur? Therefore, it is mutar to open them on Shabbat, because you don't make it into a kli. After you use it, you just throw it out, right? Chametzion says, Arabashah says, Maran, Arabadia says, being that you throw it out, therefore you're not making a kli. And once that is allowed, they're not mukseh, so you could easily take a can of tuna or whatever it is and move it aside. It doesn't have a halacha of mukseh at all on Shabbat. How about coffee? Coffee powder, or cocoa powder, or tea leaves. Right? So they're not mukseh either. Because if you take, we said before, if you pour water from a kedishani onto it, you could drink it. You could being that you make a drink with it. And one of the Sefarim brings down that even coffee powder itself, it has a taste. Some people will like it. Some people will eat it. So therefore, because of that, it is not mukseh, and a person could go ahead and move these things on Shabbat. How about a raw egg? What's the halacha with a raw egg? Again, that's also allowed, because someone wants to eat it, right? Some people eat it. Cantors, chazanim, they want to smooth their voice, that it should be nice and smooth. They take a raw egg, they put it in a bowl, and then they just gulp it down. Back in Iran, I don't know if you remember or they would take a raw egg and they would put sugar, cocoa powder, that's it, and they would beat it into a froth, and they would eat it. They weren't afraid of salmonella and E. coli, none of these stuff. So back then, I guess these things didn't exist. But so therefore, they are being that a person could theoretically eat a raw egg. So therefore, a raw egg is not mukseh mahmat gufo, and it could be moved. How about peels of eggs, right? Eggshells. So some say when they are still wet, that means they're still fresh. You just peel them off. They're not mukseh because chickens could eat it. Chickens do eat them, right? But Rabbi Nishchai writes that it is asur to move, right? Because they are very unhealthy to eat, and the owner of the chicken would mind them eating this stuff. So there's a machloket, like, what do you do with tochmok shabbati, like, eggs, the eggshells on Shabbat? What should you do with it? It's better to be machmir and to move it b'shinui, right? You put it on a napkin or something, and then move it b'shinui. That's the best thing to do. If I'm not mistaken, most of the animal feed here in America is chicken feather. You know that. Most of the cattle, most of the cows and everything, they feed them chicken feather.
Feather.
The feather, because it has a lot of protein. And, unfortunately, though, it carries a lot of diseases also, and that is what makes the cows sick. But you're talking about multi-billion-dollar business. These feathers, okay. I guess the egg shells contain a lot of calcium, so they're very healthy as well. Who knows? Okay. Now, food which is asur to eat, like what? I'm sorry, not asur to eat. Food which is asur behana'ah. You cannot have any benefit from it. Forget about eating. You can't even have any benefit from it. You plant a tree, and it's during the first 3 years. Or someone chas v'shalom plants kilaim, plants a mixture of two seeds. That's asur b'hana'ah. It says to kad esh. That means they learn from the pasuk that it has to be burnt. There is nothing you can do with it. So it's asur b'hana'ah. You cannot benefit from it. Or let's say milk and meat were cooked together. That's also asur b'hana'ah. You can't sell it. You can't have any benefit from it. Or any non-kosher wine, right? Stam yinam, any non-kosher wine, they are mukseh, mahmat, gufo, and they cannot be moved. Like, let's say you have a guest, and poor things, they didn't know, they thought they were nice, and they brought you a non-kosher wine. And they're like, here, b'chavod, they give it to you. Like, so you go, whoops. No, I'm just kidding. Tell him, just put it in the closet over there. Like, tell them to put it somewhere safe. While they're carrying it already, they're carrying it. But it's mukseh. It's mukseh mahmat gufo, and it cannot be moved. Now, an interesting halacha. Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, right? Masechet Shabbat daf kuf lamed hey over there. It's talking about children, brit milah, birth, all of that things. So it says a baby that is born in the 8th month. We know, baby that's born in the 7th month, it's fine. Baby that's born in the 9th month, fine. Baby that's born in the 8th month, the Gemara says, he's like a rock. He's like a rock because they wouldn't make it. Right? He's like a rock, so therefore he has a halachah of mukseh. You can't move this baby. Right? This baby that's born in the 8th month, you can't move it, right? If a baby is safek, you don't know, is it the 7th month or the 8th month? Also, you cannot be mechalel Shabbat for this baby. That means chas v'shalom. This baby is in danger. You can't be mechalel Shabbat for him, cook up water, heat up water, because they say he's a goner. So there's nothing you could do.
Still to this day, it's
No.
not.
No. This is in Masechet Shabbat. I'm telling you what's going on 1800 years ago. And the Shulchan Aruch brings it also. 500 years ago, Shulchan Aruch brings in the Simon Shin Lamed, Halacha Zayin and Halacha Chet. He brings it there, like that it's asur. Like it's unbelievable. Nowadays, Baruch Hashem, with the advent of medicine and the invention of the incubators, like you're kidding. 8th month, they could even have a fourth month, even baby. I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen it, like, you go to the hospital, like, in Israel, it's called machleket pagim, like, these babies that were born 4th month, like, tiny, like the size of an egg, like, literally, like, tiny, and you see them, Baruch Hashem, and they develop, and they're fine. It's miracles, Baruch Hashem. And so being that, so then it has a halacha of an absolutely normal human being, and you could even be mechal shabbat on these babies, and definitely they're not mukseh. It's not like it doesn't have halacha of even that cannot be moved, and therefore they are that's fine. Now from there, from the top of the kingdom, we move down about animals, right? What do we do with the animal kingdom? Any living animal, they're all mukseh. They're mukseh mahmat gufam, right? And it is asur to move them. Can't move them. Let's say you're sitting. Doesn't happen. Like I mean, years ago we went to Israel to visit my family, and they lived in Pardes Katz. Pardes Katz is a little town right next to Bnei Brak. A lot of Persians live there, and it had chicken and all these things running around, So this chicken, halacha is this chicken is like starts going around, coming, and he's like going to break all your glass and everything. You can't hold it. It's mukseh. You can't say, hey, come here, chicken, and take it and taste it. It's gonna break all my dishes, my china. Sorry, get rid of the chicken. But on Shabbat, it's mukseh. You can't do anything with this chicken. That's how it is. Not only that, let's say you have parakeets, gorgeous parrot, and talks and everything. There's no shimush. You're not using it, right? You don't have a usage for it. If it's something that you have a usage for, fine. But this, it sings for you, it talks for you, it tells you jokes, whatever it is, it's still not considered enough of a shimush to say that it is not mukseh. Therefore, one cannot take it and move it from place to place. Also, if you have beautiful, beautiful fish in a fish tank or an aquarium, that too cannot be moved, right? So the question is asked, what if you set it aside? I would like to move it from place to place so I could enjoy it.
So a dog needs to be walked.
Right, that's right. So Chachamim say, once they said that Ba'alei Chaim, they are mukseh, they went across the board, right? And also they say the usage is not a real usage. A rock, you could use it to hold the door open, let's say, or to crack something. With this animal, little poodle, little white dog, what are you going to do with it? There's no shimush, right? We don't consider it a shimush. And Tosafot writes in Masachet Shabbat that in Masachet Betzah, I think, that the mukseh of animals is one of the hardest muksehs. It's one of the toughest decrees of Chachamim. They're very, very thing on that. Walking the dog, you're not doing anything. It's just dogging. If anything, it's pulling, it's pulling the person. There is a slight heter for that. A person, God forbid, who's blind, who has a seeing dog, right? So over there, we say, he could use it. He has no other way of getting around. So therefore, he could use that seeing dog to get around from place to place, being, again, that he's not really, he's not moving the animal so much. The animal is what moves the person. Stops by the street, moves, and all that. It's amazing what this miracle dogs do, and therefore these things are they're not mukseh. All right, I think we're gonna have to continue next time Beli Neder with the halachot to finish off more halachot of mukseh mahmat gufo.
Can this blind person bring the dog to shul or?
That's an old question, right?